Welcome to the Tiny Box Dialogues. This series was created to share the knowledge of our experts using real examples from real people with real stories.
Welcome back. Today we are speaking to Sam Gibson Massey. Where to start? Script runner, actor, creative officer, brand lead, M&A specialist, and now the founder and CEO of the Hope Platform, which is how we met. Your overall passion is mental health care, solving big problems that help people, and using, I think we call it tech for good. But please share your journey on how you ended up here from such a plethora of different careers.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the detail because I think I'll bore you with it and it's just too long. But essentially, I think what led me to acting was it's not that different, but the need and want to be accepted by others, which I soon realized you can't go on a stage and to try and seek your happiness and your fulfillment. But what that actually taught me was it taught me to kind of move out of myself and understand myself on a much deeper level. I once had an acting teacher who said to me, you have to be the character and the psychologist of the character to truly understand, who this person is. And that just led me down this road of I wanted to know more about people, what makes people tick, who we are as people, and ultimately where it comes from is I've got this deep rooted passion for helping people and wanting to know more about them. So on a very base level, without going into the roles and the jobs, that's my passion. My passion in life is people and helping people.
I love that. And I'm sure there's some actors out there that would totally agree with you. It takes the idea of staying in character on set a whole other way from the psychology of it. Anyway, we have heard a lot about mental health this past 2 years. Let's not ignore that, right? With the pandemic, there's been a lot more that's been brought to the surface. This is not a new term. It's not a new need. What do you consider mental health issues? Why are they arising? Why are they being viewed differently? Because I do feel that there's a stronger acceptance of the fact that most people are dealing with these issues.
Well, I think it's important to recognize that we all have mental health. There's some statistics out there, and I get wrapped up in numbers and stats all the time. That 1 in 4 of us will have some kind of mental health issue in our lifetime. But actually, there's a friend of mine who said to me, "It's that those are the 1 in 4 that you know about." If I take my own family, for example, there's actually 3 of us who've had mental health issues, but only one of them, went away and really did something about it. So, I'm probably the 1 in 4. But we all have mental health. I think what the pandemic has done is accelerated the mental health crisis that was probably already underlying. And because of lockdown and because the fact that we're not physically together as a species, we're actually further apart. We're actually on paper with the loneliest we've ever been. And I think it's important to recognize that. So in terms of what is mental health, what does it mean today? I think we all have to recognize that we have it, and we all have it's a different scale for a different person. And we have to recognize our own mental health. And we also have to try and recognize the mental health of others. And what does that mean to them? Some people might need one thing, whereas someone else needs something completely different. So I'm so pleased that we are thinking of it in a much broader sense, in a much more focused way than we probably have ever done. I could go into, and we will go into detail of this later on, but the generations of our parents, for example, probably didn't think about it in the same way that we do, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing that it's been spoken about, and hopefully we can do something about it.
Do you know what? I really love the analogy you said earlier about, if somebody walks into a doctor's office with a broken leg, then you got to fix it. And I like the idea that you're taking back the mental health piece, because when we talk about mental health traditionally, it's often in the you've got mental health issues. Not that we have mental health and all of us have health that we need to maintain, just that we have mental health issues. So I really like that analogy that you made. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, mental health, I use this a lot. I use this a lot recently, is that mental health is health. It isn't separate. It isn't this separate thing. I had a therapist once who said to me, if you have a sore throat, Sam, what are you going to do about it? I'm like, I'll probably take a pill, right. Okay, well, if that sore throat leads to flu, what are you going to do? Well, I might need to go to the doctor then. She goes, right, you do something about it. It's obvious to yourself what you can do with your own physical health, because we've been taught to do that from a very, very young age. It's very normal to go to the doctor when you've got a problem. If you've got a broken leg, you're probably going to need to go to hospital, you're going to need some sort of specialist care. Well,
Yeah.
mental health is exactly the same. We all have, and it comes in different waves, and sometimes you're going to need, you might need a pill, sometimes you might need a chat, sometimes you might need something a bit more. I think if we don't recognize that in everyone, when someone's got a problem, we can't ignore it. It's not, there's a great TED talk by Johann Hari, and he said that if someone walks in with some, gaping hole in their body, you're not just going to ignore it, you're going to have to do something about it. And I think that's the most important thing to recognize, is that we have to do something about these problems. And they're not huge problems, it's really normal. It's really normal to have, issues when we're at work or issues when we're at home.
Yeah, and if it's ignored, that's when it becomes a huge problem, right? I want to just jump on something you said there. It was about the education, because you just shared a statistic with me recently regarding children and what they're taught in school. And wasn't it? The safe and healthy, health and safety piece, please.
Health and safety. This was taken, actually, I'm pinching this from something I heard recently, and it jumped out because it's so alarming. Is that every school in the country, in the UK has to sign a health and safety waiver for all of their students. And to walk in the door, they have to physically sign this document. It's a legal requirement. So every school in the country signs it. It means that they're compliant with health and safety laws. There's also one to do with mental health. Only 2% of schools in the country have signed that document. Because, and now you could say, well, you could point the finger at the school and say, well, that's terrible. Or maybe you could say, well, maybe the schools don't feel well equipped and they don't know how to deal with mental health issues because it's complex, it's difficult. You're going to have to deal with parents and carers and guardians of those children if there's a mental health issue and if you promise to do something about it. So even from a member at school, it's not really thought about, and no one really knows how to deal with it. And then you transfer that into, we go to university, we leave university, we go to work. And then we're sort of now looking at these statistics and the scale of the problem, which is incredibly vast and enormous, and we can't control it. It's actually out of control. And that's why we've got a global crisis on our hands regarding our mental health.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. I mean, I remember hearing a story about how a class teacher had actually started getting children as young as 5 to meditate. And just this silence in class had reduced bullying and the pressure that they felt, etc. But as you say, if the parents are not all aligned on what mental health means, then how can a school then promise to deliver it? And that is a bit of a tough area. But then you also said, sorry, I just want to move into the workplace piece, because you mentioned just there the global crisis. And I shared some statistics with you earlier that I had found about anxiety and depression being on the rise. And what does that mean in the workplace? And, I found stats like 88% of employees reported concerns with their stress levels over the past 2 years. Now, what is stress if not mental health issues? Thinking about this, of course, it affects the bottom line. You've got 550 million workdays lost each year. You've got 52% plus that are experiencing burnout in 2021. This is not like 10 years ago. This is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So what do you think is the impact of corporate culture on mental health for workers?
I think it's, so there's two things. I think firstly, we probably haven't been taught to recognize when someone has a problem at work and how to deal with it. There's that. And the second thing is because of the pandemic is we physically can't see each other. So I'm on Zoom, whatever, how many hours a day, sometimes 12, 14 hours a day, and I have a mental health issue. Apart from my family, and sometimes we don't want to take those problems home to our family, who's going to help me? Who's going to help me through that? So it's really difficult to recognize. And because of that, because we're not physically together, it's very, very difficult to then get things off your chest, to actually start talking to people. So it isn't about having good employee benefits. It's not, you can't stick a plaster on this thing. I think the way that we have to shift this conversation is we have to get into the mindset of, okay, if we want to help people when they're at work, then we should give that responsibility to a leader within our team or a leader within our organization. If we've got someone who looks after finance, someone who looks after talent, someone who looks after HR, someone who looks after sales and demand and the rest of it, why would we not have someone who also looks after the well-being of our people? And you're going to see the role of and it's not a new thing, the chief happiness officer. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing that more organizations are hiring for this type of role. And the more that we do that, the more that we can focus. I mean, it's proven, it's scientifically proven. Obviously, the happier your people are, the more productive they are, the more they feel they have a sense of well-being, they have a sense of purpose, and they're going to work harder. But if people are burnt out, and that you're going to see more and more burnout, obviously, because of we're working much longer than we've ever done before, you're not going to get productivity at the end of those 14 hours. You're going to get the opposite of that. I know I can count on multiple hands colleagues and friends who've been through burnout in the last 2 years. Have had to take not just a few days off, months, 3 months, sometimes 6 months. That does nothing for anyone. And I was actually speaking to my wife about this, because the place where we used to work, she was saying, she'd sort of talked about people going through burnout. Maybe we need to implement some well-being days. I'm like, it's not specific to your team. It's specific to everyone's team. And it's not just, it wasn't just the company I was working in. It's a global problem. So I think we need people focused on it at the highest level, who know what they're doing, experts who can help organizations move into a much happier state of being from where we are today.
Yeah, I think you had a great saying when I shared the statistic that 16+ of employees will just quit their job because of stress, which is something, again, that is not new. You mentioned it earlier, it's the great resignation is not a falsehood. This is happening, right?
Yeah, it's not journalistic spin to try and get more people to join new organizations. It's people saying, and because of the pandemic, because we've had to shift, our lives have completely changed. It's been a cultural shift. And normally what happens in these times is that you'll see this, there'll be completely different ways of doing things, different ways of working. And because of that, people have just said, I just don't want to work like this anymore. I'm going to do something for me, because I need to do something for me, because I've realized that life isn't about, the 9 to 5 doesn't exist anymore, but my life isn't about giving 12 hours a day to this place which doesn't mean something to me. So it is a real thing. And the best way to describe this is when I was reading about this, a really good article in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago about the role of the chief happiness officer. And the outcome, if we don't do something about that, is that our employees are going to vote with their feet. Essentially, they're going to walk out. That's how they'll decide if they do or don't want to be a good place of work.
I think that's a very visual saying. Vote with your feet. They're going to
vote with your feet. I loved it. I was like, I'm going to use that. I don't love that. The meaning behind it is great. No, but the metaphors, mean something to us, because that is happening, obviously.
It is happening, but what I find interesting, and I know we've both worked for organizations that actually have great employee assistance programs. I mean, they really are concerned about mental health, but there's still a barrier there, right? I mean, what percentage of employees are even using these assistance programs?
I think so. There's, in the US, I think it's around 7%. In the UK, I think 3 to 5%. So you're talking about over 90% of people not using it on a daily basis, regularly, making it part of their everyday health. So you have to say, well, why is that? And there are lots of different reasons. One is that they're not very well designed, some of these platforms. They're a bit convoluted, and they're a kind of a one-size-fits-all solution. The second thing is, it's something that's been bought for me rather than I've bought for myself. So if I go and buy a product or a service, it's because I've wanted to.
You believe in it.
You believe in it. And also, I think this is just this isn't a sweeping generalization, but often they don't really fit into the life that we actually lead, which is, convoluted, and it has family, and it has friends, and it has social, and it has work, and it all kind of, we can't time box our health to just when we're at work. And it's very difficult to do that, I think, with the way that some of these programs and assistant programs are designed. But like I said, I think what it needs to be is, it needs to be a shift at the leadership level, so that it's not about plugging in or plugging onto your everyday, we have this health benefit. It's no, as an organization, culturally, it's normal for us to take well-being days, and not just your standard 25 or 30 or 35 days of leave a year, whatever it might be. It's no, we focus time. I was reading a really I was listening to a really good podcast with Michael Acton Smith, who's the CEO and co-founder founder of Calm. And as an organization, he instigated a whole company leave policy where he recognized that people were burning out. And he just basically said, every single person in the organization is going to take a period of time off. I can't remember if it was a week or 2 weeks. Now, you would think that's absolutely crazy, you know, you would, but what they did was they plugged in certain people, contractors who could manage the technology, manage the social media, manage bits and pieces. Nothing fell apart, nothing went wrong.
Isn't that the irony though?
Hugely satisfied.
I mean, the irony is it's Calm, which was created and actually grew off the back of the pandemic because so many people were looking for it. I mean, I use it myself for meditation and for sleep stories. I get that, but isn't it ironic that because it grew so fast, they actually need to instigate their own Calm policy?
Yeah, of course.
In that sense,
of course.
Right?
And I mean, a radical way of dealing with well-being, but it worked. It absolutely worked. I mean, but who else could say? I mean, it's very difficult if you're a 50 or 40,000 person organization. Say, right, everyone take a week off. It's not so easy, right?
But on the other hand, I liked what you said about the incentives. We focus on being a number one brand or the number one consumer product or whatever the case might be, or we are incentives are focused on you have the best profit, you have the best employee engagement, you have the best this and that. What about profit being, or your bonus being based off of, are your employees mentally healthy, physically healthy, happy, right? That would have a big impact, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would assume so. I mean, I had a really good conversation with a guy from Slack, and we were talking about what does it mean to be part of an organization, and what does it mean to feel like you're culturally aligned. And essentially, a business has two. Most businesses are a product or a service that they give to the outside world, and we always assume that's the value that they offer to the world. They have this wonderful product, or they do this service for me, and that's fantastic. But actually, really, the true value of a company is in the people. That's where your culture really comes from, right? That's where every company's culture comes from. So if your people, the best brains, hopefully, out there, aren't happy or aren't satisfied or are feeling burnt out, they're not going to be serving the customer or whoever it might be at their best. So
you fail before you start.
It goes without saying that the value of the business lies in those super brains that sit in those rooms, designing the technology or building the service or building a product or whatever it might be. But that isn't a focus. I think that's my point, is that it's not a strategy point. If you look at a strategy yet for 2022 or 2023, health and well-being, I don't know if it will be in many people's strategy for next year. Or it might be. Or it might be, or maybe it is because people are seeing there's a problem in it. But I think when you look at those strategy decks that you probably see all the time, I don't think health and well-being is in there, right? It's probably not.
And let that be a lesson to anybody listening, that you can be ahead of the game and put the mental health strategy into your strategy deck. I do want to take a moment to touch on something that isn't talked about enough. A friend of mine, Matthew Staines, is actually starting Stigma Statistics, which is based on men's health, because your 1 in 4 statistic also works for the UK, where 1 in 4 men have contemplated suicide. Now, I live in Germany, and here are some things that I see regularly, which is you can't call it therapy. If you're getting therapy, it's got to be called coaching, because there's such a stigma attached to it. Men cannot be perceived as weak. I'm just going to touch on the men thing just because I have you in front of me and I can leverage your insights. But what is the impact of that social stereotype on corporate culture?
Oh my God, that's such a big question.
Just a touch.
I think it's really, really difficult to for some men to get the right sort of help because of this social stereotype. And there's we talk about toxic masculinity is a real thing. It's not just a phrase that we throw about. We're expected to be a certain way. We're expected to be, boys especially. I think it comes from childhood, is that there's an expectation that you should be a certain way, and that means that when you get to a certain point you need help. Well, that goes against the social stereotype that's been sort of burnt into my psyche. I think that's obviously that's a problem. I've had that problem personally, and I've had that in my family as well. That's, I think you could hear that there are so many. Suicide is the biggest killer for men under 45. It's a real thing. So we need to think about it and address it, and we need to start changing the dialogue. Again, this doesn't just come from from changing it in adulthood. It comes from teaching children and boys, like, it's okay to be sensitive, it's okay to cry, it's okay to talk about your feelings. It's the most normal thing in the world. But if we're not teaching them that, then that's a problem.
I remember hearing when Robin Williams, his cause of death was suicide, and I remember there was a big dialogue around that, about how you can't commit suicide. You don't say somebody committed cancer. You say they suffered from cancer and then they died, right? And that was a huge dialogue back then, wasn't it?
The stigma attached to and you can't commit suicide because you haven't committed a crime, and it was a criminal offence. It has been a criminal offence for a long time, and that's why it was talked about being committing suicide. So
and you have quite a personal story about this, don't you? Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, of course. So my dad went through some depression basically when he was through his business, and his business wasn't doing so well, and I didn't know about this until much later on. All I remember is at the time it was quite a dark, depressing time in the house, and I probably didn't really understand what was going on with my dad. I probably had some inkling, but it wasn't talked about. My dad didn't talk. He's just from that generation, didn't talk about his feelings, still doesn't, but he's overcome that depression. But it was a really real thing. He was suicidal, and I didn't know this. So it's a real thing. And when you know that, it sort of, when I found that out, and I didn't find this out until I was probably like late 20s, you start then thinking, what if he had? What would my life had been like if I hadn't had my dad around from my teens? I have friends who've been through that and actually been through it, and it changes you forever. So we have to do more for not just everyone, but men in particular who really struggle with this. Matthew, I know him as well, doing an absolutely incredible job with stigma statistics. It's an incredible thing, suicide prevention. We should all support him and what he's trying to do there. Again, coming from a real place of purpose and wanting to do something incredibly positive.
Let's bring that back to positivity, as you say, because I think that we are now in a position where, as you say, you've got personal stories. Everyone could probably find that personal story. And that's just for the people who admit that they have a problem. Like you said, most people don't. So how does technology help us to achieve that? Now, we're living in a different world. Technology is on the rise. We see Calm, Headspace, all these different apps that are coming out. Clearly, we know why there's an increase in mental health related technology. But it also requires individuals to get over the stereotypes, to recognize when they need help, and then to get that help. Now, I know you love one particular app called Wiser. Can you explain why and what you think they do a bit differently? It's
an amazing app, which is essentially a chatbot. We've all probably interacted with a chatbot at some point, online, through online banking or a shop or whatever. And it came to me through a friend of mine who also had a startup, and she said, I know this woman who started this company, and I've met her, and you should have a look at it. And what it does is 24/7 help. So anyone can sign up to it, and you'll always get a response. Doesn't matter what time of day or night it is, you'll always get a response. Now, you might think, I don't want to talk to a chatbot, but the wonderful thing about these sorts of chatbots is they don't feel like a chatbot. They're an actual, feels like more like a person. And sometimes all you need to do is just get something off your chest, be heard, get the feelings across to whatever it is you're feeling. And if you are in an extreme case, and if you do need a little bit more help, they then get you on the road and help you find someone as well. So technology is going to play it's going to play probably a pivotal role, especially because of where we're living today in this virtual hybrid world, and we're not really going to go back to the way we were. Going to a therapist isn't really going to be the same, and getting help isn't going to be the same.
And that comes to the inclusivity that tech allows for, even in mental health care. And I have a friend and therapist that you've spoken to as well, Simone Smith, who has the same approach, that not everybody needs a therapist, not everybody needs to, and it's not about making money through a therapy. It's about just giving help as needed. So can you just share a bit about what you're trying to do there with the Hope platform?
Yeah, so we are trying to build a platform that helps people find the right person for them. So in the first instance, that's probably going to be a therapist. But if I look at my own situation, I was actually looking for more than a therapist. I was looking for life help in general. So maybe we'll include that as well. I think honestly, what we can do more of as humans is just listen out for each other. And your therapist might be your best friend who you go for coffee with, or it might be a book that you divulge in, or it might be something that you listen to.
Yeah.
But we have to, in a way, we have to become therapists ourselves. I've got a good therapist friend of mine called Tracy Rubel, and she's a couples therapist, and she started this thing called Sidewalk Talk, which is where they would, this is before the pandemic, but she's carried it now onto a podcast where they would meet on the sidewalk and host events for people to just come along and just talk to each other.
Wow.
And in a way, it's kind of like the reinvention of the tribe. You know, we've become this disbanded group of, you know, social media savvy people who don't really interact with each other properly like we used to. And I just love that, because it's a real interaction. It's a real place where you can come. You don't have to be a therapist. You can just be someone who can listen in and just talk to a friend. And that is probably going to be something that we have to think about. There aren't enough therapists and counselors and, you know, psychotherapists in the world to treat everyone. There just aren't. We just won't be able to treat
then they'd
everyone.
burn out, and then we'd have real problems, right?
Well, we don't want them to burn out. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you know, so where do you see this moving? I mean, with your app and others, you called it Hope for a reason. So do you think it's just the community aspect, or is it bigger than that we just need to recognize that this is still a problem?
Yeah, it's a problem that we're going to have probably for a long time. I think COVID has accelerated the problem, and I think it's going to take, you know, it's going to take the village and all the villagers and the villages around you as well. It's not just going to take one village, it's going to take everyone. So I have this conversation quite regularly with investors, and they say, oh, who are you competing against? And you have to have a slide in your pitch deck about, you know, your competition. Who doesn't? Of course you do. But my thing with that is, I'm like, I need all these people, I need all these other companies.
They're complements, not competitors.
It can't be the one. We can't just be the only one. You have to have a collective approach to mental health. It has to be the responsibility of not just technology companies and platforms that have got solutions, but just everyday humans, us, who we are. The next person you speak to, just ask them, how are you today? And really ask them, and really listen to them. Don't just kind of ask it out of, you know, politeness. Really listen to them. It will mean something to them if you do that.
That actually, we have only a few minutes left, and that brings me to, actually, that's one of your top 3 takeaways.
Okay,
so
yeah,
clearly
it is,
this is a crucial and important topic, and we can never have enough good people helping other people. But you had some, I think it was 3 aspirational messages of things people could do today after listening to this podcast. So
listening, active listening. I'm not brilliant at this, so I'd say try and do this if you can, especially if you're an extrovert like me.
Yeah.
And actively listening. Listen to all the words that they're saying, and listen to them in more than just that. I mean, listen with your whole being. How do they look? How do they seem? Do they seem like they're on the edge, or do they seem like something not quite right? You don't have to go digging around trying to, you know, you're not expected to be a psychotherapist, but just listen to them and just make sure they're heard. That's often what happens is to listen and then be heard as well. That's something I think is really important.
Excellent.
The second one is, this is coming from a book by Martha Beck. I don't know if you might know this book. It's called The Way of Integrity. And in it, she explains an exercise, which, this is just fun. When I read about this, you write a letter to someone and you tell them what they mean to you. And you can, and because we never get letters anymore, it's a really nice way of doing it. But there was a test, or she did a test on this, and it increased the connectivity between those people by more than something like 50%. So it wasn't just like sending an email or sending a chat message or a WhatsApp or whatever. It really meant something to them. So the second one is, don't have to write a letter, but tell someone who you work with, or someone who you're close to, or a colleague, what they mean to you, and really be, you know, tell them all the wonderful things that they are, and then tell them to pass it on. So it's a kind of a, you know, sort of a chain reaction thing. And the third one is to remember, and this is hard if you're going through something, because I've been through this a lot, and you can always feel like you are alone in your own headspace and your own thoughts. You're never alone. You're never truly alone. And as long as the first 2 are happening, is number one, if you're being heard and listened to, and if someone's telling you how much they mean to you, then hopefully you won't feel alone. But remember that you're never alone. If I think about my dad, he probably felt so alone that he didn't know what to do, and that makes me upset. Even now, it makes me think that's really sad that he didn't feel like he could talk to anyone about it. Luckily, he did get help. So always remember that you're never alone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sam. I mean, there you have it. Remember to listen to each other, tell a friend what they mean to you or a colleague, and remember you're not alone. This audio will be shared on Spotify. This video will be shared on YouTube, and the information on how to reach Sam will be below both of those. So please do reach out if you want to support his platform, or if it's something that a story you want to share, or you just need quick guidance. I love that your third piece of You're Not Alone is supported by your 1 and 2. That's fantastic. So thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. And I'll see everyone else online next week. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you.
Bye.